In the rush to put a label on it, and those who have to slide on a politically incorrect line of thinking, the attack in San Bernardino has brought the new reality home yet again. Terror, workplace violence, whatever you want to call it. We are helpless to predict or stop it. Politics did indeed rear its ugly head within minutes of the attack, as candidates on both sides latched onto this tragedy and began to spin it and fit their own narrative. But have we reached the time when these narratives are desperately necessary? Well, here's a narrative plenty of people don't want to hear because it doesn't speak to their nature. Killers are better weaponized than cops. That makes them bolder and more willing to take a chance at killing the innocents. And if you were in a similar situation to the one in Southern California Wednesday, it's not what would you do, but what should you do? For now, keep it right here and get some intelligent discourse. I'm Ed Berliner, and this is The Hard Line for Thursday, December 3rd, 2015.
Police in Southern California still don't have a motive in Wednesday's shooting in San Bernardino. But one thing the San Bernardino police chief is sure of, this shooting was planned.
So I don't think they just ran home, put on these types of tactical clothes, grabbed guns, and came back on a spur-of-the-moment thing.
The overhead shots showed multiple cops with weapons drawn, people being herded out of a busy office building, emergency vehicles carrying out the wounded, and later to a black vehicle that we would learn carried the killers of 14 people. It seemingly took minutes for the social media lines and broadcast airwaves to be filled with conjecture, rumors, accusation, pleas for help, and calls for action as we struggle to place a label on what happened in San Bernardino, California. Those labels, those written and spoken words, say a lot about us and say a lot about how we reacted to just the latest mass killing in our own backyard. We're joined by noted expert in counterinsurgency and counterterrorism, whose commentary can be read at thegorkabriefing.com, Dr. Sebastian Gorka, and the Senior Program Associate for the International Security Program at the New American Foundation, David Sterman. Gentlemen, I want to thank you both for being here. David, I'm going to begin with you. Is it not fair to say that as this investigation continues, while some people are hesitant to put the label on it, we must point to this being Islamic-based or at least Islamic-influenced terrorism? The signs are all there.
As the investigation continues, it's definitely becoming evidence is emerging that would suggest that this is jihadist terrorism. In particular, anonymous reports from law enforcement officials that the couple who allegedly committed the attack had links to others under investigation. However, it is still quite early to make a clear judgment. For one thing, all of these reports remain anonymous. There are anonymous reports from other law enforcement officials that call into question the nature of the link. And the FBI and the ranking chair of the Intelligence Committee have both publicly called into question the nature of those links.
All right, now let me take that. Dr. Gorka, let me come to you because, again, as David points out, yes, it is still early in the investigation, but we are getting so many things. We're now hearing apparently that one of the individuals, at least the male individual involved in the killing, may have gone to jihadist-connected websites, may have started to contact radicals who are under investigation from the FBI. So I hate to use the old phrase, but walks like a duck, quacks like a duck. Don't we have to take that step even at this early stage?
Are you asking me?
Yes, sir. Yes, Dr. Gorka, to you.
Yeah. Look, I think the evidence is already in. We have the fact that this was a premeditated attack. It was multiple attackers. They used IED devices that are completely indicative of jihadi techniques and practices actually coming out of Al-Qaeda manuals. The fact is we know that they were both Muslims. The fact is this is not going to be some spur-of-the-moment attack based upon some work-based grievance. As has already been mentioned, one of the individuals was in contact with people that were being investigated or had been investigated by the FBI for their jihadist proclivities. So I think we will get more information, but anybody who wants to spin this into some kind of grievance-based workplace violence, is living in a fantasy land.
Now, let me get to that. If you will, David, there have been people who have already said, and some have made a mockery of it, said there are those saying that this could be workplace violence. Wait a minute. We're way beyond that, don't you think? Can't something be domestic terrorism and workplace violence at the same time? They targeted people at that workplace. So don't we have to say that this was domestic terrorism and stop using that workplace excuse?
It's certainly true that something can be both workplace violence and terrorism, and it's essential to keep in mind that there can be multiple motivations in different extents. However, one of the problems with prematurely labeling it as jihadist terrorism before more comes out of the investigation is that we don't know the details of what particular pieces of evidence actually point to that and should be drawn out to make that case.
Let me say this, if you will, for a moment, if I can interrupt you for a second, because you use the phrase jihadist terrorism or jihad, is jihadistic terrorism here. Is it not fair to say, though, that we can say maybe this is not jihad, as it is basically known in the Muslim faith, but this is still Islamic extremism connected terrorism? Wouldn't that still be fair to say?
It's not clear. We don't know the motive. And one of the important things that's key to pull out here is that it's very costly for the FBI or the government to prematurely label, much more costly than it is for us as analysts or commentators to make that label.
Okay, now,
so it's certainly fair to start reporting and seeking the details. The government is in a very different position on how to label it at such an early stage.
Granted, you are exactly right that when it comes to the government and law enforcement, they have to take their time. We get that. Now, you mentioned the FBI. Here is the assistant director of the FBI LA field office in a press conference today, what we know about the suspect's travel history and being in the United States. Here's what he said.
We know there was some international travel. They came into the U.S., both he and she was not his wife at the time, but she is now. They both came into the U.S. in July of 2014. They have since had a baby together. He is a U.S. person. She is still here on a K-1 visa.
Let me take this to the political side. Dr. Gorka, if you will, I direct this question to you, because here in America we have many of the presidential candidates on the left who, when they used social media after this, the first thing they went to was, of course, prayers for the family, but then they talked about the NRA and gun control. Many of those on the right went right to, again, Islamic terrorism. Now, politicians use things for their own advantage. We get that. But in your opinion, and with what we know and what the FBI is telling us, isn't it just possible that those on the right got it right this time?
Well, before I answer that, let me just clarify one thing. Your other guest said it could be a combination of workplace violence and jihadism. Wrong. Those two things are antithetical and cannot occur at the same time. Workplace violence has no political end state. Terrorism is about changing the political or religious end state. Conflating those two is absolutely detrimental to any analysis of this event. When it comes to the reactions, the political reactions, I'd just like to hear one law that a liberal politician or a member of the administration thinks they could enact which could stop such an attack. You could confiscate every legally owned weapon in America and you would not stop the kind of attack that happened yesterday because they just wouldn't buy them legally. In this case, they did. But criminals intent on murder will get their weapons however they wish to get them. So the idea that this has something to do with inanimate objects is utterly asinine.
So, Dr. Gorka, let me just ask you very briefly, 30 seconds, answer the question I then posed to you initially then. Is it possible that just while people will hammer away at them, the right got it right this time when the first thing they did was they went to the terrorism angle?
So, absolutely, absolutely. This is not a man going postal. This is about two people preparing using IEDs, 4,000 rounds of ammunition. This is a pre-planned attack. It is clear that it is terrorism. How sophisticated, how deep the connections go to international organizations is another question the FBI will unearth.
David, I've got about 45 seconds left. Is it not fair that we have to use the phrase domestic terrorism here? The media is not using it. They're basically, a lot of the mainstream is just glossing over it. But with 6,500 rounds of ammo, 12 pipe bombs, you get the feeling they were doing a lot more than going to bomb an office party, if you will. This is domestic terrorism, yes?
This distinction is simply not true, that there cannot be both personal and political motives. It's not based in any of the literature on radicalization, and is simply a false political point.
Do we call this domestic terrorism, in your opinion?
We will see. It is highly likely that we will be able to. However, it is still quite early, and is worth waiting for the reporting to solidify and become more public before making that.
Dr. Gorka, 5 seconds, yes or no, do we call this domestic terrorism?
The FBI uses domestic terrorism against militias and those kinds of groups. This is jihadi terrorism, black and white.
Gentlemen, we are going to be talking about this for many weeks as America looks for answers. David Sterman, Dr. Sebastian Gorka, I want to thank you both for joining us. I hope we talk again. Have we reached a point where every person in America needs to know what to do when confronted by a shooter, such as they did in Southern California? We'll tell you next on The Hardline.